Your world is waiting, but first you have to access it. Welcome to the Joshua Roy Show. We don't do fluff, we do freedom. Real talk on mindset, cutting edge coaching techniques, and the hidden frameworks for lasting change. If you're ready to move from being stuck to becoming the architect of your life, you're ready for this. Hit subscribe. Let's get to work. The interesting thing is, and I was having another conversation with my father-in-law. I've been studying this thing called health for some period of time. And at the moment, I've become quite fixated in breathing and breath work. And my interest has led me to that point, but also realizing the correlation between breath work and energy. So when I ask people, where does energy come from? I get a variety of different answers. If I ask one person where energy comes from, they might say, well, it comes from food. That's where energy comes from. And they'd be partially right in that assumption. Other people will say it comes from water. And once again, they'd be partially right because we need a system that's working at a high functional level in order for us to get energy. Other people might say that energy comes from glucose, from sugar that we eat and consume, and they'd be partially right as well. Really what it comes down to is the building blocks that make up you, that make up me, are actually the cells of the body. So energy actually comes from the cells in your body. If you want high energy, then those cells need to be working at a high functional level. So once you understand that energy comes from cells, then it's really important for us to understand the inside workings of the cell. And we want to start considering understanding our body from a cellular level. So what we've got here is a cell that makes up you and I. Now, I've drawn this cell at a size where you can see it. Just realize that these are very small, they're microscopic inside our body, and we have liver cells, we have eye cells, we have skin cells, we have gastrointestinal tract cells, we have cells lining our gastrointestinal tract, it starts at the mouth and then finishes at the other end, and food doesn't become part of you or I until it goes in through that wall into the bloodstream, and then it becomes part of you and I, because the blood is the river of your life. And actually, it's interesting, in Australia here, the farmer who has sheep are born with tails. And what a farmer will do with a small sheep is I'll put a little tiny ring around the sheep's tail. And what that does is it constricts the blood flow. And within a week or less than a week, that tail just falls off. It dies and it's just released from the body. And when we consider that blood is the life of the flesh, we need to ensure that our blood is moving and it's giving our cells all of the nutrients and the other components of good health that it needs. And I'm going to talk about that. Let's have a quick look at what this entails. And what we're looking at is the inside workings of the cell. If we consider the inside workings here and consider the most important parts of health, then you and I can work out what it is that we need to do in order to improve our health, energy, and vitality. And this is where we look at optimal health, energy, and also getting over tiredness. And so realize that here's what needs to happen. I'll go through this and just explain the inside workings of the cell. So the first thing that we have when we look at the cells that make up you and I is that we actually need glucose to come in through that cell wall and into the cell. So number one is glucose. The second thing that we need is water. We need water, and if you've been listening to the doctors and the nutritionists for years, they've all said about 8 glasses of water a day. Somewhere between 1.5 and 2 litres of water you and I must consume water if we want optimal health and optimal energy. We want to be able to function adequately during our day, then we need water. And so what we've got here is, if we consider the inside workings of the cell, there is a 20-step process that this glucose and water goes through in order to produce energy in our body. So it's a 20-step process, 20 steps. Now, once this process is concluded, the cell gives us 2 units of energy. So to say 2 UE, 2 units of energy. So what we got is a 20-step pathway, 2 units of energy. Now, these units of energy come to us in the form of pyruvate. That's what it's called, pyruvate. You don't need to remember that, but just realize you're getting 2 units of energy, and that's what glucose and water do for you. Now, beyond that, there's another process, and this is an 8-step process. And it's been said that these cells of our body, or this system, is the powerhouse system, this second process. So what happens is, after this second 8-step process, we get a whopping 32 units of energy. Now, a lot of people wonder, why does a 20-step pathway only give us 2 units of energy? And once those 2 units of energy are fed into the powerhouse, which is this next 8-step process, why does that cause us to receive 32 units of energy? That's an exponential increase. And the secret is oxygen. So your blood system, your circulatory system, brings the oxygen to the cell. Once that oxygen enters the cell, now we're looking at a crazy amount of energy. Now we're looking at high energy. And this is what we want. This is what we need. This is what we all crave and desire. We want energy so that we can play, so that we can jump, so that we can do activities with our family, so that we can have an occasional late night, so that we can enjoy ourselves. We want energy to be able to do that. Now, here's the problem. If our lungs are not working at optimal level, unfortunately, we're not going to get this level of energy. And so part of the work that I do is teach people how to breathe properly, to make sure that they're getting the glucose that they need into the body, so this first process can occur correctly, ensuring there's enough water so that we can form these 2 units of energy, and then ensuring we've got enough oxygen to produce 32 units of energy. So this is the idea. Now, here's the thing that you may not understand about the cells of your body, is that we don't need nutrients necessarily to create this energy. This energy comes from glucose, water, and oxygen. So why are doctors and dietitians telling us to eat healthy? Why aren't they just saying, go and eat sugar, go and drink water, breathe lots of clean, fresh air, and you will have lots of energy? Now, why do they teach us about this thing called nutrition? Why do they tell us that we need a balanced diet? Why are they saying that we need lots of fresh fruit and vegetables? Why are they instructing us in health, all things health? And the reason for that is, inside every cell that you have is a little part of the cell. It is called ribosome. So ribosome is a little part of the cell that is set aside and that produces a new cell. So one thing that we know about our life and about our cells is that our cells have a lifespan. A cell is born, a cell lives and functions, hopefully at a high level for a period of time, and then the cell will die. And the reason we know this is because if you don't change your clothes and don't change the sheets on your bed, after a little bit of time, things will start to smell because of all the dead skin and because of all the waste that's coming out of your body. That's why we need to bath and change our clothes and shower, is because we're constantly shedding ourselves, kind of like a lizard does. A lizard does it all at once, Whereas we as humans, we shed ourselves little by little, a little here, a little there. And so when you look at the skin of your body, there are indents in your skin. And consider every one of those indents as a little tiny sewer. Now, I know that's a little bit disgusting if you think about it, but that's actually what happens. Because our body has 4 processes of elimination. And there are 3 that people know about readily, but there's one people don't know about as much. So the first is your expiration of breath. And that's why another reason why we do breathing exercises. The second is through your skin. Your skin is porous. Your skin is constantly at work helping to shed those things that we don't need. It pushes toxins out of your body. The third is your urine, and fourth is your feces. So think about every divot in your skin as a little tiny sewer. That's why we need to use soap, wash ourselves. We need to ensure that we're clean and looking after our body and getting rid of that dead skin, and also getting rid of any toxins that the body is pushing out of our system. So hopefully that all makes sense, that we need to ensure that we're cleaning ourselves, that we're looking after our body. So here's what happens. In this little part of the cell called ribosome, this is where the new cell is being formed. Now, the reason the doctor and the nutritionists tell us to eat good, healthy, well-balanced meals is because of the need for cell replication. Now, I'll explain it this way. If you have all of the materials to build a house, well, you can build a house. You might need bricks and mortar to build the outside walls of your house. Now, let's say that you're missing some materials, and those materials are going to affect the strength of the bricks of that house. And instead of building houses with brick, maybe you're going to build the houses with mud instead. Now, it might all look good and fine when things are dry, but what happens in a storm? Well, when a storm comes and hits that mud house, well, it turns into a mud heap. So the bricks need to be able to set, and they need to be solid, like as in a brick veneer, in order for that health and that's the health of that structure to remain. It's necessary. And it's the same with the building blocks of you and I. If we have foods that we're bringing in that are low in nutritional value, then what can happen is we start to create faulty cells. So instead of the cell replication being at a high level, suddenly now we're replacing our current cells with a defective cell. And if you replace healthy cells with defective cells, you're not going to produce the energy. You'll end up being more tired. You'll end up having a cell that cannot produce this level of energy simply because the cell of your body is defective. Now, you might ask, well, Josh, if I have defective cells, well, how long should it take me to fix this, to resolve this issue? And the answer is from a couple of days to a couple of weeks to a couple of months. And so think about your body this way, that within a short period, maybe 6 to 8 months, your body is being completely remade. Now, some parts of your body are remade very quickly. For example, your eyes. You have a new eyeball every 2 or 3 days. The eyes is probably one of the fastest cell replication systems that we have in our body. Another one is your stomach lining, part of the gastrointestinal tract. Your stomach lining is reproduced every week or so. It's about 5 days to 7 days. And you have a completely new stomach lining. So you are constantly being remade. According to what? Well, what's remake us? Well, it's according to the DNA. You see, Watson and Crick, 2 scientists, got together and they discovered this thing called DNA. They discovered that each of us has a genetic code built into our system. And these genetic codes operate in this part of the cell. You see, every single cell in your body has the genetic code necessary for the entire body. Now, this genetic code is important because it ensures that we replicate ourselves correctly. It's ensured that our body creates the same eye color and the same skin to cover our body, and we're the same height and the same size as we currently are. And so you need this DNA for ribosome to work effectively. However, if you're not giving your body the nutrients that it needs, then it cannot produce or replicate another cell according to the DNA. And so now you have that defective cell. All right, just drop a yes in the comments. Is that making sense? I'm getting into the inside workings of the cell, and I'm hoping this makes sense for you so that you start to understand that what we need in that cell is we need oxygen. Really important, crucial part of ensuring we get energy. We need glucose to come in through the wall of the cell so that it can mix with water and produce energy. The other thing that we need is nutritions and nutrients to ensure that we can create a high-functioning, healthy new cell that works. When you have all those three components, now you have energy. All right, very good. So before I go any further, is there any questions about what we've discussed here, the inside workings of the cell? Is that starting to cause you to think, well, what do I do to correct this? How do I help this situation? What can I do if my health is not so good and I'm tired? How do I turn this around? What do I need to do? Let's have a quick discussion. Let's talk about this. Absolutely, absolutely. So realizing because there are only 4 processes, you've got to be intentional about those processes and saying, if I'm eliminating toxins, because let's think about it, and I'll explain it this way. I'll tell you a quick story, actually, or a quick example. This is more an analogy. Just imagine that you have a house, and inside your house, you have a lot of garbage, a lot of waste, a lot of rubbish. Now, the garbage collector will say that they can only take 1 can of trash. That's it. They'll only take 1 can of trash every week. And so you need to live within that. But the trouble is your lifestyle is such, maybe you've got a family, maybe you've got other people visiting, maybe you host parties every now and then. So what happens is, let's say you've got 1.5 trash cans full of waste. So now you've got a problem. You've either got to go by yourself to the dump, or you just put 1 can out and you store the rest. So where are you going to store it? Well, let's say it's a big house and you've got a room that you're not using for anything. So what happens is it's only going to be a week. And so you decide to store the rubbish in that home, in that room of the house. You shut the door, you forget about it, you leave it there. But the trouble is next week you've got a trash can and a half. The following week, a trash can and a half. So little by little, you start building up. So 6 months, 12 months later, it wasn't a big problem at first. It was only a little problem that you had an extra bit of rubbish, extra bit of garbage. But now it's turning into a big problem. So what happens is you go and you open the door and you find that the room is full of rubbish. It's full of trash. Now, the problem with that is that now it's bringing in the element of things you don't want. There's some insects living in there. There's some cockroaches living in there. There's some rats living in there. This is utopia for animals and rodents. They love it, little tiny creatures. Not animals, I should say more insects. So they love it. So they're proliferating, they're increasing. And little by little, the trash is moving outside of that door and into the rest of your life. Okay, I'm going to stop the story or the scenario there. Now, let me tell you what's happening in your body. What happens is if you're eating a toxic diet, if you're having an acid lifestyle, and you're bringing foods into your body that aren't providing the health and energy and helping to replicate these cells according to the precision of the DNA to give you healthy, high functional cells that work, now we've got a problem. We've got some challenges happening. And so what your body does, because your body is amazing, the way your mind works, the way your unconscious mind works, all the processes that are done without you having to think about it, what the body does, it takes that excess toxins and it pushes them to a part of the body for safekeeping until they can be eliminated from the body. So let's say you just can't eliminate it quick enough. You can only get one trash can out and your buildup is a trash can and a half. So within 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, well, the body can change shape. Why? Because fat cells are actually unlimited in their size. And the fat cells say if there's too much glucose, the fat cell says, come on in. I've got a storage component for you. And this is what your body does. But more so if there's toxins that are coming in, then your body has to deal with that. Let's say there's too much to eliminate. So what it does, it pushes those toxins to a part of your body. It could be your liver, and it wraps lymph around it. Lymph is just fat. And so once it wraps lymph around it, then it houses those toxins in that part of the body for safekeeping until it can be eliminated. So let's go back to the story. So let's say eventually this person gets sick of having a room in their house full of rubbish. So they contact an agency and they say, hey, listen, I've got to get rid of this rubbish. Let's get a trailer to my house. I'll load it up and we'll get rid of this rubbish once and for all. And they do. They get rid of their trash. They send it off in a dump truck or send it off in a trailer, and suddenly they're back to square one. So this is what your body's actually waiting to do. It's waiting for a detox. It's waiting for a time where you can actually stop putting in the rubbish and start excavating, changing things, start eliminating that buildup in the body. Now, if you don't do that, if you don't do any detoxing, if you don't change your lifestyle, if you don't turn your life around as far as your health, then that buildup continues to occur until turn into a disease or cancer or some sickness in the body. Does that make sense? Just drop yes in the comments if that makes sense. That's really what you're doing. So think of your body as the house you live in. And my analogy there is simply letting you know that whilst your body is working with you and for you, whilst your body is eliminating toxins and waste the best way it knows how and as fast as it can, if there's too much or too many toxins in your body, the elimination process cannot occur. And this is why people are sick. Many people are sick through ignorance. They just don't understand. They don't understand this body they live in. They don't understand how a little bit of sweets or a little bit of sugar or a little bit of cakes or bickies or cookies or cereal that's laced with sugar or food that's high in sugary content or the wheat that we eat, which is full of a subsequent amylopectin A, they don't recognize and realize what they're doing to their body. And once you understand this, then you understand, okay, I need to eliminate the toxins because I'm using energy to keep these toxins at bay. I'm not producing high quality cells that work. I'm not breathing enough oxygen in order to give my cells all of the units of energy that I can. I'm perhaps not drinking enough water and not getting enough glucose. Actually, glucose is one of the least problems that we have. Like most people get enough glucose. Here's the problem though. We have more diabetics than ever before in human history. And you might have wondered why that is. Like what happens? Why have we got so many diabetics around? Why have we got so many people who have insulin resistance? Now, if you've got insulin resistance, that prevents the glucose from getting into the cell to mix with water to produce the energy that then mixes with the oxygen to produce more energy. So right here back at the beginning, insulin resistance happens and occurs and prevents that glucose getting into the cell and stops the whole system from working. And so if you've got insulin resistance, now you've got a different problem. It's a challenge, it's a problem. We're going to work through that challenge. We're going to work out how to get rid of that insulin resistance so that you can then produce healthy, high-functioning cells that work. All right, so if you've got diabetes, what that means is that your pancreas has actually given up. Your pancreas has stopped working. It said, no more. I can't keep doing this. I'm working 36 hours a day, 9 days a week. I can't keep doing it. I'm joking about that. It's impossible. But that's the way your pancreas feels. And when your pancreas feels like it's working overtime for no extra pay, when your pancreas feels like it's working weekends and holidays for no extra income, it's just working around the clock. And, think of somebody who's on a salary and their boss comes to them and said, instead of working 36 hours this week, we want you to work 90 hours this week. And here's the thing, we're not going to pay you any extra money. We're just going to give you the same wage. You're going to earn your $40,000 a year, and we're going to work you hard 90 hours a week. You're barely going to be able to sleep or do anything else, and we're not going to pay you any extra money. Well, how many weeks do you think that person would stay with that employer? Well, they'd leave pretty much immediately. They'd be like, why would I work an extra 40, 50 hours? Why would I double the amount of output and get no extra pay? That's ludicrous. There's no way I'm going to do that. They'd quit. They'd leave the job. There's no way that anybody would put up with that. In fact, they probably couldn't physically put up with it. In fact, they'd get to the point where they're so run down that they couldn't function at all. They're running on 3 or 4 hours sleep a night at best. So if you think about that, that's what your pancreas feels like. Your pancreas is overworked. It's underpaid. You're loading yourself up with processed sugar, and sugar is just the crystallized acid which is extracted from the sugar beet or the sugar cane. That's what sugar is. Now, all the scientists will tell you, not the scientists, in fact, it's actually the scientists that work for food companies. They will tell you, and they coined the phrase, sugar, a natural part of life. If you ever heard or seen that slogan, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, is sugar a natural part of life? Well, the answer is no, not in its processed form. You see, sugar goes through 9 steps of processing before we get the white sugar that we can then use in our cakes, biscuits, cookies, that we can use in our sweet foods, our lollies, our sweets, our candy, as you call it in America. So when we've got sugar, artificial sugar that's been placed in these objects, it is no longer a natural part of life. Now, why do I say that? Because once you extract the sugar from the fiber of the original plant, now what you've done is you've lost the slow release agent. Here's what your pancreas loves. Your pancreas loves to have sugar that's mixed up in the fiber of vegetables and fruit. It loves it. And why does it love it? Because it's a slow release agent. Because what happens is when you take in that piece of fruit, as you work through processing the fiber, you get a little bit of sugar here and a little bit of sugar there and a little bit of sugar here and a little bit of sugar there, and your body is able to manage these small amounts of sugar that are coming into the system. And this is acceptable. This is easy for your pancreas to deal with. But the trouble is, in today's world, people have a can of soft drink. They have a chocolate bar. People live on fast food. People live on sugar and lollies and sweets and candy. There are people that eat a bag of candy every single day. And they love it. They enjoy it. Why? Because our palate says yummy. Because we love that taste of sugar. It makes everything sweet and wonderful and easy to eat, easy to consume. It may lack nutritional value, but it tastes great and it feels good. And so here we have people that are eating this sugar, and here's what happens. That when you eat sugar in that form, when you partake of that crystallized acid that's been extracted from the sugar cane or the sugar beet plant, suddenly now that sugar causes our blood sugar levels to spike. We call this the glycemic index. And once those blood sugar levels spike, now what's happening is your pancreas has to work overtime to regulate your blood sugar levels. That's the pancreas's job. Your pancreas has one specific job, and that is to regulate blood sugar levels. Because if those blood sugar levels go too high, danger, danger, danger. We need to see a doctor. We need to go to a hospital. Our blood sugars are out of control. But even worse than that is if your blood sugars go too low. Now, if your blood sugar level goes too low, now you're faint. Now you're tired. Now you can barely stand up. You're about to collapse. you've got bigger issues. Okay. And it can also be fatal. Both can be fatal, but more so the low sugar levels. And so you need a healthy, high functioning pancreas to regulate the blood sugar levels in your body. But the trouble is, because most people, or many people, are eating foods that cause their blood sugar levels to spike constantly throughout their life, the pancreas gets to a time where it says, I've had enough. That's it, all over. I cannot keep doing this for you. I cannot keep regulating your blood sugar levels. It's putting too much strain, too much effort. It's like that employee working 90 hours a week for the same amount of pay. And finally they say, I quit. That's what your pancreas does. Your pancreas will quit on you. And when your pancreas quits, now you need to regulate your own blood sugar levels. And this is why we have what's called insulin-dependent diabetics, and put in the right amount of insulin before and after meals so that they can regulate their own sugar levels. When their sugars go too low, they get a sweet or a lolly or something to quickly spike their sugar, to quickly jump it back up to where it needs to be. They also have other activities of putting the insulin to reduce blood sugar levels so they don't get too high. And so it becomes a full-time job for them, and they've got to now consciously take over the job that the pancreas did automatically. So now your body is forcing you to take charge of your health. We're looking at 1 in 4 people throughout their life now developing diabetes. And go back 40, 50, 60 years ago, you very rarely heard of a diabetic. It was one of these rare conditions that maybe people have. But what's happened? Well, in the world today, processed food, these big food conglomerates throughout the world are telling us what's healthy and what's not. And they're expecting you to just follow along and just go along with what, if they say it's healthy, breakfast, the most important meal of the day. And what are they doing? They're giving us cereals and breads and different things that we know are not healthy. And I can explain all that to you. I won't spend time now doing it, but I just wanted to give you this idea, this understanding that it's up to you to look after your own health. Do not trust what the health, or what the food giants are trying to tell you. They do not have your best interest at heart. They are not concerned about your health. What they are concerned about is the money that they will make from the food products that they put on the shelf. That as you consume it, they make more money. That's what they're concerned about. They don't care how heavily processed it is. They don't care if it's laced with sugar. They don't care if they're using wheat products that aren't that good for your body. There's a hybridization of wheat that occurred in the 1950s. And I won't talk about that now, but just letting you know that there are health practices that you need to take on. There are things about the food that you eat that you need to know. And it just so happens that I run courses and training programs so that you actually don't have to guess anymore. So that you actually know what foods are going to be good for your body and your cell. First of all, we've got the water and the glucose, which we need. And remember this, that when the glucose is wrapped up in the fiber, it acts as a slow release agent, doesn't harm your pancreas. You don't develop insulin resistance, and that glucose comes easily into your cell. And just realize this, that you can get all the glucose you need from fruit and vegetables. You do not need any extra sugar at all. Some people say they need a soft drink for a pick-me-up. Some people say, well, I need that coffee. And coffee's another topic, and that's a stimulant. And people put sugar, extra sugar into that coffee. So they got not only the caffeine from the coffee, but they also get the sugar dump from that coffee, even though it's only 2 teaspoons. It's a small amount. They say, oh, it's only a little amount. And I understand that your body's amazing. You understand that too. Some people break every law of health, and yet they continue to live. And we wonder about that. We think, how incredible is the human body? And so what I want to share with you is, if you live these laws and principles of health, then you will have energy beyond what you could have dreamed or imagined. In fact, There are people in their 30s, 40s, even 50s who have the energy of a 20-year-old because they start following these principles, these concepts. They start to realize what's healthy, what I need to reduce, and what I need to increase in order to maintain optimal health levels. So this is an understanding for you of the inside workings of the cell. We've got the glucose comes in, mixes with the water, gives us 2 units of energy. We've got the oxygen that comes in, gives us a whopping 32 units of energy. We have cell replication occurring, where we need the nutrients to come in to create a new, healthy, high-functioning cell that works so that we can continue this process of life and living. And I've also discussed the pancreas with you so you can understand how that works. Is that all making sense? Just drop yes in the comments if you got something out of today. Is that all making sense? Are you starting to open up this idea that I need to breathe better? I need to look at my diet. I need to reduce processed sugar. And I can also talk about wheat as well, because all of the wheat that we currently use is a hybridized form of wheat, which causes blood sugar spikes also. And so realize this, that the bread that you eat, unless it's an ancient grain like quinoa, kamut, or spelt bread, those ancient grains will not cause the blood sugar spike that the new style of bread does. So realize this, that biscuits, cakes, cookies, donuts, bread, cereal, pasta, all of that contains this new hybridized bread that causes blood sugar levels to spike, which causes extra load on pancreas, which causes us to not be able to replicate our cells at a high functional level. And this is why some people are tired as well. What I'm giving you is just the first step. Mind you, you practice this, this will change your life. I want to go deeper than this. I want to take you on a journey through your gastrointestinal tract. I want to help you to understand this at a deep level. And I also want to help you to change. Because a lot of people, they get this information and they say, well, I know that I need to eat healthy, but what do I do about that? How do I change? Well, it just so happens that I'm a practitioner of neuro-linguistic programming. And what does that mean? Well, neuro-linguistic programming is all about reprogramming your brain and your thoughts to take new actions, to get new habits, and therefore produce new results. We'll actually be looking at the emotions that you run, because some people talk about toxic emotions. And this is a really critical part. A lot of people think that it's all about diet, it's all about food. But if you're eating all of the right foods, if you're eating very, very healthy meals, but you've got toxic emotions running in your body, you're angry a lot, or you're frustrated a lot, or you're dealing with a lot of stress at work. And as a result of that stress, cortisol is running throughout your system crazily. When that happens, you've got to start considering all parts of your health and all parts of your life. Wellness seminar, it is NLP based because I practice principles of NLP. And the 2 NLP processes that I'll be using for that seminar is one, the swish pattern. Now, I used the swish pattern with my wife because she loved ice cream. And after using the swish pattern, she could not eat ice cream, any ice cream, for 6 months. I used the swish pattern with a man who was a heavy meat eater. Now, this wouldn't be a problem. However, he developed gout. And his doctor told him they needed to cut down his meat, but he loved meat. He loved anything to do with chicken, to beef, to fish, to anything meat-wise. And he was just eating heaps of it, but it was mostly the red meat. And he was told by his doctor that he needed to cut down and lay off the red meat for the gout's sake. He struggled to do this, but through an NLP training session, I was able to use what's called the swish pattern, and he could not eat any meat for 3 months. Just couldn't even touch it, couldn't even eat it. And that had a profound impact on his health, and it helped him to deal with the gout at that time and get his body into a detox state whereby his body was able to clean that room that was filled with rubbish, like I explained. So he was able to make those changes. So that's the first one. The second NLP process I use is called the slingshot method. And the slingshot method is simply going forward into the future, going forward into two different futures. The future that you don't want, health-wise, where you see yourself with low health, with low energy, with tiredness, and then you see yourself with optimal health. And then your unconscious mind is able to then recognize that if you make some changes in the here and now, if you flick that switch, if you make those shifts, that you can have a profoundly different future and a profoundly different life. And so once you realize the power of these techniques, you realize that you no longer have to consciously make those choices. Those choices can be made unconsciously. It's not willpower. This is working with your nervous system to make the shift. And so if you want to deal with the problems or the challenges of tiredness without needing to use all of your willpower, then the course or program will be useful for you. Welcome back, and I hope you learned something great, something you're going to take out to improve the quality of your life. Now, this has been Joshua Roy. I'm your happiness and fulfillment coach. I'm a results coach helping you to take more control of your mind, your thoughts, your actions, your behaviors, and your life. If you haven't already, make sure you follow, make sure you subscribe so that you can get all of the new exciting content that is delivered through this and other platforms.